You can also vote on the questions that you like and want most answered. So now on to the event that you're waiting for. Saadia Faruqi is a Pakistani-American author, essayist, and interfaith activist. She writes the children's early reader series, Yasmin, and middle grade novels, including 1,000 Questions, which is publishing in October. She is the editor-in-chief of Blue Minaret, a magazine for Muslim art, poetry, and prose. She is a fan of mystery thriller novels and lives with her family in Houston, Texas. Laura Shovan is an author, educator, and poet in the schools for the Maryland State Arts Council. Laura's novel and verse for children, The Last Fifth Grade of Emerson Elementary, won the Sybil's Award for Poetry, was an NCTE Notable Verse Novel, and a Bank Street bestseller, Best Children's Book of the Year. Laura grew up spending summers with her British grandparents in Nottingham, where the story of Robin Hood is set, and she lives with her family in Howard County, Maryland. Welcome, Saadia and Laura. I am so happy that both of you are here with us for your new book.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here.
So happy. So I'm going to be asking you all a few questions, and then we'll get to the audience questions later. But I'm so excited to dive into some of the themes and just talk about the book. So I thought we could start by talking about the title of the book. So this beautiful cover, A Place at the Table. And I was hoping that the two of you could talk about it from your character's point of view. So give us a little bit of a synopsis about the book based on Sara and Elizabeth. So Saadia, do you want to start by giving Sara's point of view of the book?
Sure. It's actually, her name is pronounced Sara, which is a point of, I usually don't correct people's pronunciations. In fact, if my son was sitting with me, he would be upset at me, like, why do you always have to correct people? But it's actually a point in the book that, you know, a lot of immigrants with difficult names or unusual names often have their names mispronounced, and it's kind of hard for kids to step up or stand up and say, hey, this is not how you say my name. And so I'm kind of learning from my own characters, which is always strange. But yeah, so Sara is a first generation girl, middle schooler. Her parents are actually like me and my family, who are immigrants from Pakistan, and she has grown up here and is kind of living this double life of being, somebody different at home versus at school and not fitting in anywhere, because, that's how first generation kids are. And I think that the title kind of points to that. Also, there's a lot of food in the book. So a lot of times, and A Place at the Table really refers to a lot of my interfaith background, where we try to bring people together to talk about issues, and that was a part of just something that is from my background, I guess.
Great. Laura, do you want to talk a little bit about Elizabeth's point of view?
Sure. I think the sort of the original idea for this book was having these two girls who are both first generation, but very different experiences of being first generation American, and kind of coming together, both of them wanting to help their moms get their citizenship. And it was Saadia who brought in the cooking element, which is really what originally inspired this title, which I love so much. And I think for Elizabeth, and this was true for me, so this is Elizabeth's story is loosely based on my own growing up, is that tension that bicultural kids and first generation kids feel of, do I belong? That experience, Saadia and I have talked about this before, when your kids are first generation, of being very aware that there's a home culture that's not American, and how well integrated is that into the home life. Do you feel, like Saadia was saying, like you live a different life at home and a different life at school with your peers? And then that experience also of visiting the grandparents in whatever the home culture is, and feeling so deeply connected to that, and yet realizing once you get there, oh, I'm not really 100% part of this either. So A Place at the Table is that idea that I was just writing myself a note before. Not only do I belong, but the idea that somebody has to set the place for you. Somebody has to invite you to come and sit. And I think that was, I just think that's why the title works so well for the book.
Yeah. Well, how did the two of you land on that title? Is it something that you brought, or did you flesh it out together? Like, how did you land on that title?
I don't remember. Why we were just brainstorming titles. I don't know. Do you remember, Laura?
I am known for being good at picking titles. I will say that.
Well, I'm going to point out a couple of things. The cover is just beautiful, and I love Elizabeth's. She has her charm bracelet with her TARDIS machine on there, and her cup of tea, and then Sara has she's drawing because that's her passion. But Saadia, what is here? What is this treat? Is this a Pakistani dessert that's on the cover?
Yeah. So I don't know. We don't want to do any spoilers. But there is a cooking competition so the girls are part of a South Asian cooking club after school, and the school is holding an international night, and there's going to be a competition, and the different groups will make something together in groups of 2, and so Sara and Elizabeth pair up together kind of reluctantly to participate in this competition, and they decide, since they're so different culturally, how nice it would be to create a dish that would be kind of like a joint effort, but also bring flavors from both their backgrounds and their cultures, which is, there was a lot of tries and a lot of things that they decided not to do based on that it would not work. And that was actually because we were also going back and forth as writers and thinking maybe this would work, maybe this would work, and then actually finding out that no, some of those won't. So that is the final thing that they that they think of, and I don't want to spoil it. It is a Pakistani dessert, but there's a lot of there's a journey in the book before they get to that place of coming up with that perfect thing.
Yeah, a little bit of trouble too.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to our cover artist Anusha Syed, who, this was for me, I felt like this was a different experience than with my other books. I felt like our publisher was just very, very respectful of especially Saadia's wishes, of having an artist who understood Pakistani culture, and even when the audiobook recording, because they were sensitive to the needs of this particular book and to the needs of the authors, it was really nice to be able to have Anusha do the cover for us, and we absolutely love it.
Yeah, it brings in so many different things from the book. It's like not just one thing. There's a lot of different things going on.
Yeah,
that are just you could do a whole discussion on what is this and what is this.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you could just look at it for a long time. It's beautiful. So to talk a little bit more about the food. So clearly cooking connects Sara and Elizabeth. So how has cooking or food connected you to your culture?
Oh, this is really interesting. Saadia and I have talked about this before. So I'm the cook. I'm a baker, mostly a baker, but a cook. And, I'm just going to say that we haven't really talked about it too much, but Elizabeth's family is Jewish in the book. And I grew up in an interfaith family. My husband and my family is interfaith. And during the pandemic, we've really reconnected with having Shabbat dinners. So we've been baking challah every week, or I should say, not we. I'm taking credit. So I think food isn't important. It's sometimes, when you have these foods that are connected with special occasions or special days, food adds to the rhythm of life and connects us with our cultures, going back generations and generations. So that's on my Jewish side. On the British side, I brought this, Saadia, I didn't tell you, but Elizabeth mentioned,
are we doing show and tell?
This candy that was her grandmother's favorite candy because it's very strongly scented, and I found it at the store here. You can't always find it, but it's this violet candy, and actually this was my grandmother's. I can't eat it because it tastes like soap to me, but the smell is really evocative to me of my grandmother, and so that's something that I gave to Elizabeth. When I'm working with young poets on food poems, which is something I do and something that appears in the book, we talk about how food is not just about the taste. It's about the 5 senses, but it's also about the people you're either cooking with or eating with, and the stories that come out when you share those foods.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cooking is very like based on, I don't know, so many things. And I am not a cook. I don't like cooking. I do it because obviously, my family has to survive, and they've for some reason chosen me to do that. I don't know why. I don't know what gave them the idea that I could do this. But you know, it's just so much about family and so much about how you were raised and how your parents were raised. And so going back generations, there's, even now I'll cook something and then I'll, without even thinking that I'm doing it, I'll start telling my daughter about, oh, your grandma used to make this and she would do this. And I don't do it like that because that just takes way too much time. So even the negatives and positives are all mixed up in there. But food is such an important part of immigrant culture because a lot of times, mostly that's what you bring with you. That is not, how many clothes can you bring with you if you're moving to another country, but those recipes and those skills and things like that really come with you. And then it forms a tension between you and your first generation born kids, because they don't necessarily want to be associated with that food. There's a lot of bullying that goes on in schools because of smelly food or stinky food or food that, what is that? Why are you eating this?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of, you almost have a love-hate relationship with this food. And as you get older, it's more of, oh, now I get it. So we wanted to really make that a central theme because it is such a deep part of everything that goes on in the book with these characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, to go kind of along with that theme, so what do you hope that your readers and the kids who read it and the parents that read it with them, what do you hope they will understand about the immigrant experience from reading your story?
That it's so complicated,
Yeah.
I'm disappointed when we think that we can sit on a news show for 5 minutes and talk about immigrants like you know everything about them. It's just such it's a complicated thing, and somebody who's gone through it, they know best what kind of sacrifices, but also what kind of positive things you bring to it, just the sacrifice and the bravery and I came to this country, I and my husband both immigrated in our 20s. And so it was when I try to tell my kids, you don't even understand what we went through, although we didn't have the type of difficulties that I know a lot of other people did. We've been very blessed in that regard, but it was still starting from scratch, which you can't really understand unless you've done it. Starting from scratch is just like the thing you say, but what that means, and not only physically but also mentally and emotionally, starting from scratch, letting go of the feelings that you have for one country and then being settled in a place and trying to make this not only physically your home but also emotionally your home. There's so much, and I kind of feel that's I tried to put all of that in this book. I don't know if it came across, and that's why the mom stories were such an important part, because you can't really have the story of a first generation kid without having the story of the parents,
Yeah, absolutely.
We've talked about in the past just some of the stressors that are on kids who are first generation American, and that's something we really wanted to highlight. So you see the mental health issues, which is something my mom struggled with, just coming to a new country and not having resources like friends or religion because she converted, and not having that sense of community from having grown up in a really small town. Financial stressors on immigrants, the stress of language. I love the way Saadia showed how, and this is true, I had a friend who grew up this way as well, who, you'd walk into the house and the parents would speak, in my friend's case, Spanish to her, and she would insist, like, no, I'm speaking English back to you. Like, she was really frustrated. My friend growing up saw it as a rejection of American culture. And and yet, there's like we said, there's that tension, and a lot of that happens at home. So one of the things that we're hoping is kids who read the book who are not first generation American will be more aware of some of the things that are going on and that kids who are first generation struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, my husband is first generation too, and so what his disconnect was, his parents, he doesn't speak any Korean, so there was that disconnect. So that was hard too, because his parents wanted them to speak English right away, and so they learned English, but they never learned Korean. So there's a loss of that language as well. So it's very complicated.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's so much, and you can only put so much in a book, especially a children's book. So, we're hoping that it is the start of conversations. It's the start of something. We actually have a lot of discussion questions that we've kind of shared with online and on our websites, where, if you as a teacher or a parent want to use this as a jumpstart to, for your own kids. They don't have to be from somewhere, they can be any kids and any parents, but it's important to have those conversations.
Yeah, those are great. And I know they're on both of your websites, so people can go to the websites and they can download the conversation cards. How do you hope people use those cards in homes, or do you hope people use them in curriculum? How do you hope they use the cards?
Let me backtrack and say it was really interesting because I put a call out to my friends on a couple of different platforms and asked them, for those who were first generation or second generation American, what were the questions you wished you had asked of your elders in your family? So those questions come directly from asking people, what were the questions you never asked that you wish you had? And I just, my parents are older, they're in their 70s, they're late 70s, and I know that they want to talk about their experiences, especially my mom, who is the immigrant in the family. And it's just sort of like a reminder to make the time to sit down and talk these things over, that we have to, again, it goes back to a place at the table. We have to make the space, we have to make the time to have those conversations. Otherwise, that generation's going to slip away, and we're going to lose all that family history if we don't ask the questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Another one of the themes in the book is this idea of civic responsibility and voting, and how both of the moms are becoming citizens. So because it's an election year and because we are talking about civics, how do you hope kids will get involved with the election process this year and engage in that civic duty?
Yeah, we actually have a scene that's set on a local election, and Sara and Elizabeth are both there with their parents and seeing the thing and seeing some of the ugly parts of it, but also the beautiful parts of it. So that was Laura's idea. I was like, why do we have to have a scene about elections? It had nothing to do with our book. But that's how it happens. That's when you write, you're like, putting things in that kind of become part of the story and show their need in there later. So yeah, what do you think, Laura, about what do we want kids to kind of learn from that?
I think it's connected to having that election day scene. It's interesting because Elizabeth's dad says to her, there's somebody he's concerned about who's been in office and he'd really like to vote this person out. And he says, my vote counts, at least today. And I think that fits the theme of the book, that kids can affect change by speaking up, whether it's speaking up to their friends, speaking up and saying, no, this is my name, speaking up to adults, and just supporting kids and saying, like I grew up in a very much, from my British side, the phrase "children should be seen and not heard." Oh boy, was that a beloved phrase. So to counter message that and say, no, kids, like you can affect change now by speaking up. And I know that that's not true for all kids. And of course, children have to judge whether or not it feels safe to them due to whatever the environment is. But that they do have a voice, and that I think it's our job as children's authors to say there are adults who support you in speaking up in the changes that you want to create. And I'm just gonna have to share because I just finished reading it. This is a great book on that topic that just came out, Carrie Firestone's Dress Coded, which is also set in middle school. And it's the same idea, like that kids can create change in their communities if they speak up together.
Well, another thing with that election scene also, I felt that it was important for me as an immigrant to write, to show how often excited people from other countries are to vote in the US, because so many immigrants or refugees come from countries where there's no democracy, or it's a sham, or it's like really hard to vote, or there's a war going on and it's really unsafe to vote. And, you know, when I became a citizen, that was literally the most excited I was. Yes, I can vote now, you know, but although I live in Texas and people are like, your vote doesn't count if you live in Texas, apparently, I don't know. But it's it just showing that portrayal of people. You don't have to be a certain kind of person to be excited about your country and about voting, and just showcasing that was important for me.
Yeah. I had some other questions, but I think that's a really good point. I just want to segue. I want to read a little bit from chapter 34. We're talking about when both of the girls' mothers become citizens and there's a ceremony. And I want to read this piece because I really loved it. So it's about 2 paragraphs, and I'd like you two to speak to it after I read it. So we sit in the theater and wave small American flags. There are tons of other families who come to support their moms, dads, grandmas, brothers, and friends. Nearly 50 people become citizens. We all rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance together in one loud voice that swells and echoes around us. The judge tells us that the new citizens on the stage represent more than 30 nations. She reads the names of every single country. Sara and I cheer when the judge calls out the United Kingdom, and again when she says Pakistan. You are a mosaic of people from all around the world, the judge says. You're adding color to that mosaic, sharing your traditions, your art, your food, especially your food. Everyone in the audience laughs. As you become US citizens, don't lose who you are. Our differences are what make America great. I love that.
Oh my gosh, I got all emotional hearing.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember my citizenship ceremony, and it was, you know, and it was more than 50 people. It was like a whole high school stadium. And, you know, it was, and it should have felt impersonal, but at that time when we were going through it, it still felt like it was just, you know, because it was such and a lot of people don't realize how long this process takes and how many hoops you have to jump through and how like torturous it is. I think it took me close to 20 years to become a citizen, and each of those 20 years were like filled with, you know, just worry and stress and filling out forms and thinking what's going to happen, and, you know, having to, every little thing was a magnified fear. And so when you get to this point where it's actually finally over and you've reached your goal, and I'd actually gone alone because I'm that kind of person. I didn't even like bother to tell my family to come with me. I was like, I'm just gonna go alone and do this thing. And later I realized, oh my gosh, everyone's there with their families. I didn't realize that was a thing. But it was very emotional for me. It just felt like, you know, some big accomplishment that I had done. So
yeah. Laura, did you want to say anything about that part?
I like to do personal interviews as research, so I talked to a bunch of people who are fairly recent citizens, including Saadia and my mom. And what I found out was really interesting, and I think Saadia and I tried to show this in the book, although not necessarily this scene, is that the citizenship process can be very different based on where you're from, based on who's interviewing you. So like my mom, I'll never forget, she told me she was so mad because she studied so hard for her interview. And she sat down, and she's very British looking. She's blonde and blue-eyed, and speaks with a British accent. And she sat down and prepared, you know, for this interview. And the interviewer, the only thing he asked her is Robin Hood a real person? And she was furious because she had worked so hard.
Yeah.
Which is not on the test, by the way. You don't study that.
So this was kind of borne out by some of the interviews I had, you know, like one person I spoke to, he got an interviewer who happened to be home from his home country, who wanted to speak in, you know, their home dialect, and that was like the interview was let's chat, and not, you know, I'm sure it's not that way everywhere, and my mom's experience was many years ago. It's got to be easily 40 years ago. But the point is that we need to recognize that this whole process can be very different if you're brown skinned, if you speak with an accent that doesn't sound like you live on Downton Abbey, and just that awareness. It goes back again to having an awareness of that the immigration experience is very different. Saadia and I, you know, one thing we didn't address in our book, it's not the story of our girls, but you know, the experience of coming to this country is very different if you're a refugee than if you are choosing to come here for, you know, for marriage like my mom did, or for work like Saadia and her husband did.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Everyone's story is different. And that's what I like about, you know, about writing. You just need to write your story and what resonates with you. And then there'll be lots of other books too. You don't have to do everything with your book.
And yet it's also one of the reasons why I feel like this story works best in two voices, to kind of touch on that idea that this experience is, you know, it's a commonality between the two girls, but it's also something that it helps them become aware that people can have a shared experience that's very different, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It does, and it feels very authentic. Both of the girls' voices feel so authentic, and like when you're reading a book and you're like, you know, shaking your head, yes, and you get emotionally attached, you know, it's like, that's it.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess because it came from the heart, right? I think that's the difference. If you're writing something that's true to you and authentic, and you can feel it, you know, a lot of what Sara went through, I've seen my own kids go through. A lot of what Sara's parents were going through, I've gone through or seen my friends or family go through. So when you write like that, then the reader obviously hopefully knows that this is real. It's not somebody guessing or making it up. So
yeah, and a lot of the conversations that Sara and Elizabeth have are conversations Saadia and I had. You know, we were talking about a scene, and we'd take a break and talk about our own lives, and then we'd say, oh, that needs to go in that scene. So I wouldn't officially call it brainstorming, but definitely our conversations very much inform some of the conversations that the girls have.
Yeah, good tell. Well, those are all my questions, but I know there are a lot of questions from the audience. So let's transition over to our audience questions. Okay, the first question is from Heidi, not me, another Heidi. And she asks, I'm wondering how well Laura and Saadia knew each other personally before beginning work on this book. What was the most important learning you did together as you wrote?
We didn't know each other that well. I mean, we knew each other. Everybody in the kidlit community kind of gets to know each other. If you're writing books for children, you're going to meet. We had kind of like we had participated in this mentorship program, and I had actually not been selected, but Laura had been kind enough to kind of unofficially help me with my manuscript, and that was when I was still starting out writing. And we just kept in touch, but you know, just online. We weren't friends at that time, but this book definitely had a very big impact on our relationship. You know, I guess if you want to make a good friend, write a book together.
That's a way.
I mean, it can only go two ways, right?
Did you learn anything surprising about each other in the process of writing the book?
I learned that Saadia doesn't like to cook.
Yeah, I think that Laura was disappointed. Were you? I don't know. People mostly read my books. All my books have food in them, you know, and then they expect me to be this fabulous cook. I'm like, I'm really not.
I think one of the things that we did talk about is, like I said, my family, I'm not very religious. Saadia is more religious than I am. And it was just interesting to talk about the faith experience, you know, from somebody who is, you know, like me, connected to sort of the traditions of Judaism and how that works in a family that's not very observant. And Saadia, whose family is very observant, and that's an important part of their lives. And so we haven't talked about this too much, Saadia, in interviews, but I just like that our book addresses the fact that, you know, kids' faith and religion are important in many kids' lives, and that these two girls are able to respect each other, even though they're not only different faiths, but different experiences of how much faith informs their lives.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I don't know, what do I think we learned? I mean, we definitely learned a lot from each other about writing and, you know, how to write. And Laura's got a lot more experience under her belt than I do. And when we were writing, it was literally, I had not done a lot of it before, so I learned a lot from her. You know, just writing, revising, working on things, researching. Um, I may have,
Outlining is what
yeah.
I had to learn. We could not write this book without an outline, and
I was like, no, you have to first have a calendar, and then you have to have an outline, and then you have to have this, then we start writing. So just the tools of the trade, I guess, you know, as well.
Yeah. The second question is sort of similar. So it's from Katie. She says, hi, how did you manage the collaboration process? Did you go back and forth, or did you write everything together?
So we took great advantage of Google Docs, which is a wonderful tool when you're collaborating and you live in different parts of the country. The way that we worked on the book is we did have an outline, and the outline sort of laid out not only the things that happen in the story, but who we wanted to narrate which scenes. And so Saadia wrote the first chapter, and then what we would do is, you know, Saadia would turn in a chapter to me, I would read it over, make some notes, ask some questions, and then Saadia would look at my notes on the chapter while I was drafting the next one in Elizabeth's voice. And then Saadia would go and give me notes and feedback on that chapter. So it was, you know, yes, we were kind of taking turns, but it was also kind of woven together because I think we both had a lot of input on each other's chapters.
Yeah, it was not, I mean, I don't want anyone to feel like, now we can say, oh yeah, we did it, that was great, but it was not easy. It was obviously, writing a book is difficult enough as it is, but then you add, you know, another person to the mix, so you are essentially doing a lot more planning and organizing, and how are you going to do this? You will see when you read the book that a lot of scenes are described by both girls, so we had to decide where to end. You know, so if there's a scene and it's from Sarah's perspective, we would have to decide where would her perspective end, what was the right place for it to end, and then Elizabeth's perspective begin, even though it was the same scene. Would she backtrack? Would she go forward? Would it be the next day? Would it be the same scene? So those are the kind of things that really complicated it. We spent a lot of time on the phone. So even though we did write those chapters separately, one by one, we first of all realized that we couldn't move forward unless the other person was done. So it was kind of, you know, it helps us spur us into action. Okay, I can't not do my task for this week because Laura's waiting for me, for example. Yeah. But then there were a lot of times when we would just get on the phone and talk through a chapter. And actually a lot of times I remember, you know, one of us would be dictating and the other would be writing. That weren't entire chapters, it was maybe one paragraph or two, but that really, I mean, it's a totally different experience writing with a person than it is writing alone. So, you know, definitely, I believe that it's, as a writer, I have grown so much from this experience, just learning how to do things and learning how to do things better, but it's very different from writing by yourself. And
I love the collaborative process. I don't know. I really enjoy that. And I like the idea that, you know, we were always negotiating, but like I said before, those conversations, sometimes somebody would be like, oh, wait a second. I have an idea, we didn't think about this, and then talking it over and, you know, is that something we want to include? I remember there was one scene where I wrote a scene that was really over the top. Like, people were really angry and upset in the scene, and Saadia was like, Laura, we need to tone this down. And I was like, I just need to write it this way. I need to write it this way and get it out of my system. I will come back and fix it. I promise.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Those kind of having respect for each other was really important.
Well, yeah, I mean, anything you do with someone, it's gonna be a lot of give and take. So, you know, I think that it was definitely worth it. Just like, I don't know, in the food world, I would liken it to making biryani. Biryani is like this dish which is so elaborate. You know, like I've tried and failed several times, I gotta tell you. But when you eat it, it's definitely worth it. So
I love that analogy. Perfect food analogy for this book. Great. Let's see, the next question is from Alma. She writes, my grandmother loved violet candies too. What's the brand name of the candy?
All right, I'm gonna check, hang on. It's Howard's or Chowards. I can't tell, but here, I'll try to hold it up.
There we go. Looks like Howard's. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Gita. How much influence, and you talked a little bit about this, but how much influence did you have in each other's writing, and how did you make decisions of what to cut and what to keep? So if you want to, I know you talked about it a little bit, but if you have anything else you wanted to say about that process.
Yeah, I think there was a certain point towards the end of the process where we were actually like looking at chapter lengths and word counts and things like that, and making sure that the two girls' points of view felt very balanced. So there was one part, I remember, where Elizabeth's chapter went on too long, and I just said, you know, Saadia, I think we should take this section and rewrite it from Sara's point of view. So that, I can't remember if we did it more than once, but I know in one particular chapter that happened. And, you know, it works really well in Sara's point of view. This, it's the food poem scene. But that also, you know, you can't, when you're collaborating, you can't say, that's my scene. You know, like, it's not in service to the story to do that. So you have to be vulnerable, and you have to ask yourself, as a team and as an individual, what's most important here for the story to be effective. And I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I won't say that I never had, you know, what Laura, you were saying that, oh, that's my scene. I feel like I'm a control freaky kind of person. You know, I have to have things my way. And so it was a big deal for me to be able to say, okay, we're not going to do it this way, or my character is not going to be the one who gets to do this. And it was hard, but then it was also, you know, as writers, like Laura said, you have to think of what's going to be good for the story. And at least it wasn't just one of us, right? When we were doing it together. So it's always good to have a different perspective, to have somebody else say, no, I think this is going to work, and then talk through it. So yeah, it was hard, but we did it.
I remember there was one scene when Sara goes to the Desi market, and there was a very mean shopkeeper there, and it's such a good scene, but you know, we had to sit down. The book was getting kind of long, and we had to sit down, and we were just like, it just doesn't do enough to move the story forward. So I hope, Saadia, that you get to use that scene someday.
I am definitely going to use that. That was a whole chapter, and it was like, I loved it, and we just took it out, and I was like, you know, in pain for a while. But I will, you know what, that's it. I was like, I'm just going to use this in another book somewhere. But it was not at all helpful to the story, so I guess. It was hard. It was hard. But you know, if I had been writing a book by myself, I would not have had that insight. I would not have had, I would have been, this is an awesome scene, I love it, you know, let's keep it. And so having another person there to be able to give that perspective is super helpful, and in some ways easier, because, you know, they're equally invested in the story. It's not an external person who doesn't care whether you have this scene or not. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We have another, I think it's a comment from Alma. She writes, I just have to comment about how authentic the first generation experience is that you're describing. Language proficiency in both languages, 1 foot in each country, 2 worlds. It took my mom 40 years of living in this country legally to finally decide to become a US citizen. It's a big deal. Yeah, You're really touching people with your story.
Yeah, I remember having that conversation with my husband at one point. Do we actually need to take that step to become citizens? And I think it was a lot of it was political, where, you know, we were kind of worried about what would happen, and, you know, just things were going around in this country where, you know, we didn't want to have any problems later on because you weren't an actual citizen. And so that was, but you're right, it's such a drastic step, you know, to give up your connection to a place that's your birthplace, and that where you grew up, and have all your memories and all the things that you think about, you know, the stuff you did in high school and your friends and your family and everything. You just like give it up. And I know people say you're not really giving it up, which is true. It's there in your heart, but it's also, I don't know, you just feel guilty a lot, you know. You feel like you were like disloyal. You feel like, but then it's also interesting how, if, like, for me, I have kids who were born here and who are growing up here, and for them, you end up not having a connection with them in those things, you know, because what they feel about the US, I could never feel, just because of the fact that I don't have that origin story. And what I feel to our homeland, they don't have. And I'm like, they should, you know, why don't they? But then I had the same thing with my parents, because my parents were also immigrants to Pakistan from somewhere else, and their parents, you know, we have like a history in my family, at least, and many families, of moving around and being from somewhere else. And I just kind of take comfort in that, you know, it's not a unique experience. It may be very real and something that is challenging, but it's a lot of people that you know, I know have gone through it, and so we will also go through it and be better for it.
I think it's getting your citizenship is definitely a very symbolic act, and I think that's why, you know, it was important to me when I was growing up that my mom get her citizenship, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted that to be part of the book, that both of the characters see it as kind of like an acknowledgement that, you know, this is something our family is doing together. We belong here together as a unit. And I think kids in this middle grade age, especially, you know, that family unit is still really, really important to them in this like fifth, sixth grade.
Yeah,
that's true.
So unfortunately, we were just about out of time, but a question that just sparked a question I was thinking. So if you could talk to your sixth grade selves, what would you tell them to weather the storm of these missing years? Because, you know, as you can see in the book, you know, there's friendships that come and go, and you make new friendships, and this connection is so important.
I was hoping you would forget about this question, Heidi.
Oh, sorry.
Sixth grade was actually still elementary school when I was growing up. I did think about this question, and I think that I would tell myself that, you know, there's a scene in the book where Elizabeth realizes that she's kind of like loud and outgoing. She's an extrovert, and I was not. And I would tell myself that that's okay, that, you know, having a group of 3 or 4 friends is plenty for me, and to just accept that fact.
Yeah, that's a good one. Saadia, thoughts?
I don't know who all these popular kids are, because everyone I talked to was like the same, just, you know, like, and I was like that too, just always wanting to be part of this group that I was never part of. And a lot of it was just, you know, personal things with my family, but also just being shy and being super tall when nobody else was around me at that time, and just made me stand out. And just I don't even want to think about, you know, me in 6th grade. So I guess I would just, you know, tell myself it's going to get so much better. You just have to kind of, you know, be patient. And
look, both of you now, look how beautifully you turned out.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's, you know, 6th grade, middle school is just, it's not good for your self-esteem, I feel. And It's weird. It's sad, but it's also, I feel like if we can write books that kind of help a little bit with that, then I feel like we've done a big it's like a big contribution, because so many kids, it's not that their parents aren't trying, like it's just this time where you don't want to be, you're not a baby anymore, but you're not a big enough kid to actually have any agency in your life. You just wish that you did, and books can help with that.
Yes, 100%. Yes. Yeah. So I know we're just about out of time, but something that we've been asking our guests when they come on to PNP Live is, people are curious about what have you actually have been reading. So Laura, I know you mentioned a book. Could you just mention that one more time with the name of the book and the author?
Dress Coded by Carrie Firestone. And this is about a middle school where the dress code has, the adults of the school have gone haywire with enforcing the dress code, and the girls and the guys too, start to fight back. And I thought this book was really, it's well written. One of the girls has a podcast, so it plays around with form, but it's a really good story about kids creating change at their school.
Nice. Saadia, do you have any recommendations?
It's not middle grade though, because it actually came out already. It's a chapter book series by my publisher, Capstone, and it's really awesome, Astrid and Apollo, the series. And this is like my sweet spot of, the early readers and the chapter books as well.
What's it about?
It's a Vietnamese family. And in this one particularly, they go camping for the first time, and they're kind of scared, and but there's several books, so I'm super excited because it's the kind of representation we haven't had a lot of, and especially in the younger groups. So I'm so excited that we're seeing more rep of different groups in this country, and it's so heartwarming because we haven't had that, and we need to have more of that.
Absolutely. Who's the author of the Astrid and Apollo series?
Her name is V.T. Bidana, and it's illustrated by Dara Lasha Lee. So definitely own voices, and since it's from Capstone, which is my publisher for the Yasmin series, they're really big on own voices and making sure that people are with the group that they are with, and it's kind of she's a debut author. I'm trying to see, I said Vietnamese, but I don't think it's really Vietnamese. It's the Hmong American group, which is kind of so I have to read not have to read a lot of like picture books and early readers, and they're so fun. I mean, no heavy reading.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. Is there anything else you want to say before we end up our time here tonight?
What was your favorite dish that was mentioned in the book, Heidi?
Well, I can't say because that would be giving something away.
That was the winning, not the winning, the entry for the competition.
No spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers. Yeah. So you have to read it to find out.
Do you know that Laura made out all of the dishes?
Well, there's the recipes in the back, so we can try them. So
yeah, there's one, I believe, recipe in the back. But then our websites have several more recipes, and you can go on YouTube and search up the others too. And that's if a middle grades cooking club can do it, then
we can do it. We can do it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you both of you so much, and much success with the book. People can see in our chat how they can get this book and some of the backlist books. So thank you both so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. To you.
Thank you so much for hosting us.
Thank you. Thank you, and our audience for being here. Thanks so much, and keep reading widely. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Saadia. Bye, Heidi.
Bye, thanks.